Chapter 14 Maleficent's Revenge. "You have disobeyed me, Pete," Maleficent addressed a cowering Pete. Maleficent and her allies, including the unknown spy, were all situated in their meeting room in the castle that formerly belonged to Organization 13. PJ and a cloaked man with spiked silver hair were sniggering while Cossack smiled wickedly. "I told you not to engage Sora should you encounter him," the witch continued, not at all pleased. "Still, you aren't a total failure." "Huh?" Pete asked, surprised by his master's sudden lack of aggression. "By using that army of Heartless to confront the Keyblade heroes," Maleficent explained, "you made them give a donation of thousands of hearts towards Kingdom Hearts. Such a charitable offer will increase in great darkness that will flood from the keyhole in that moon after we have all the princesses here. Which reminds me," Maleficent turned to PJ, "why are you not guarding Alice, Aurora, and Cinderella?" "You told me to come here for the meeting," PJ answered, a little flustered. "Then who is guarding them?" the sorceress asked. "I walked by after you summoned PJ here," Cossack spoke up, "so I ordered 4 berserkers to guard them." Maleficent nodded at the nobody. "Very good, Cossacks. We need them guarded at all times. Who knows when they might try anything funny."
"So,"
the silver man next to PJ began,
"what are we going to do to get Sora and the last princess here?"
"It would be useless to get them now," Cossack said. "They both wield Keyblades, and we need to build up our army for when the keyhole is complete." "Our army is massive," Maleficent began. "When Sora last closed that keyhole and Kingdom Hearts, he prevented any army of Heartless larger than any force the worlds have ever seen from entering the realm of light. And as soon as we open that keyhole," Maleficent closed her fist and began cackling, "I'll be able to extract that army and use it to conquer all."
"So, what are we going to do about the Keyblade brat, then?"
the man asked. Pete humped his chest. "Haven't you been paying attention at the meetings? We're going to turn him into a Heartless and give him the what for." The man with silver hair pounded the table as he rose.
"But how, man, how?"
"Patience, Nixion," Maleficent spoke as she raised a hand. "We'll toy a little with the boy's emotions for sport first. He is perfect plaything that we can manipulate to our will. He will come to us in the end. Yet we still need the rest of the princesses. You and Pete will go and kidnap the remaining ones, minus Kairi. Cossacks will probably need your help to capture her and Sora." Nixion and Pete nodded and vanished through a portal of darkness. Maleficent then turned to Cossacks, who raised her eyebrows. PJ shifted nervously. "What sort of thing," he asked, "do you have in mind to do to Sora?" Maleficent laughed at him. "My dear PJ," she answered, "we will simply destroy his home and kill his friends and family. Cossacks kill his mother personally, and throw his beloved princess's parents as well for good measure." "What of Riku and the king's lackeys?" Cossacks asked. "Let them live," Maleficent ordered. "It will hurt Sora and Kairi's feelings even more if they found out that their best friends could only stand idly while you killed their beloved family, destroy everything by means necessary, and use as many resources as you will. Just make sure Sora will be thrown into a senseless rage." Cossack smiled at her master before opening another portal. "I guess I'll draw them into a false sense of security first," she stated, backing away. "Then I'll crush them." The portal closed after her, and Maleficent dismissed PJ so he could resume his duties. "Oh, this is bad," PJ thought as he walked down the white corridors towards the castle's dungeon. They hadn't changed much since the organization left. The only real additions and renovations that had been made to the whole castle were thousands of black thorns wrapped around the exterior and decorated the dungeons, and a small guardhouse built for PJ next to the large and only cell in the dungeons. "This is very bad, and there is nothing I can do to stop it," PJ stopped in front of the cell's bars and dismissed the nobodies Cossacks had summoned to guard the princesses. He sat down and placed his head in his hands with a long sigh. "Whatever is the matter, PJ?" Alice asked as she, Aurora, and Cinderella came to rest near the cell entrance. The three in the cell had long since learned that PJ was a spy for King Mickey, and so they had become friends quite quickly. "Yes," Aurora asked. "What happened in the meeting?" PJ sighed and began to explain. "Well, it started with Maleficent chastising my dad about fighting Sora when he shouldn't have." He started with a smirk, and the three girls behind him began giggling. Then she explained that because of Pete's blunder, Sora and Kairi had contributed towards the great darkness that would come from the keyhole. PJ's face slowly fell as he recalled the events, and she asked why I wasn't guarding you. Then it went on to ordering Nixon and my father to capture the rest of the princesses of Heart, except for Kairi, and now, he heaved out, she's just ordered Cossacks to go to Deathly Islands and completely trash them while personally killing Sora's mother and Kairi's parents. The three princesses gasped and displayed looks of sheer terror. "That's horrible!" Alice exclaimed. "Shush!" Cinderella said hurriedly, looking around. "Maleficent may be nearby." PJ snorted. "No, she won't," he said. "She'll be too busy devising schemes of what to do when Sora comes rushing here to get revenge on her." PJ sighed again and slumped further down. "There's nothing I can do about it," he exclaimed, pounding the ground with his fist. A silence developed between the four of them as they thought of ways out of this predicament. "Well," Aurora began after a time, "we could warn them that Cossacks is going to attack." PJ looked up. "You're right," he said in amazement. "I just remember that Cossacks said that she would draw them into a false sense of security, so she probably won't attack for a few days, which will give them time to ready themselves." PJ got up and turned to Aurora. Despite the fact that she was behind bars, he took her hand and kissed it. "Thanks, Aurora," he said before turning his back on them and heading towards the guardhouse made for him. Before he stepped in, he called at them over his shoulder. "Can you three ladies guard yourselves for a moment while I warn our friends?" PJ chuckled as he saw their smiling faces and stepped into the guardhouse. It wasn't much, just a couple of square white rooms. PJ walked up to a bookcase and pulled out a yellow book titled The History of Cheese. The bookcase flipped around to reveal a secret passageway that led down into PJ's communications room. Sitting down at the table with an electronic setup, PJ turned on the transmitter and set it to video, already inputting the desired receivers. "This is PJ calling King Mickey aboard the Avenger and Axel on Destiny Islands. Message, over." Riku was sitting quietly with Yuffie and Axel in the house the two teachers had gotten. It seemed normal from the outside, but inside was a different story. It was normal for most aspects, but there was a pinball machine in the rec room that went to a hidden basement that held all their monitoring equipment. There was a transmitter that allowed messages to be sent between worlds, and a radar detector that allowed them to map out the different locations of Heartless throughout the town. Yuffie had already told Riku that its range was limited and couldn't scan further than 3 kilometers outside the town, and there was also a direct phone line to the mayor. Riku was sitting back with his eyes closed, relaxing on the chair he was sitting on. He hadn't had a very tough day. Slaying only about 50 Heartless was nowhere near as bad as the biology essay he had to write. The topic had been Describe and Explain the Functions of a Working Heart. Having been schooled by Ansel the Wise while he was working on bringing Sora's memories back together, Riku had learned a lot about the workings of the heart. His teachers at school did not seem to acknowledge the work of Ansem, and Riku had to spend an hour defending and arguing his position in class to them. That was hard work. Riku sighed as he remembered triumphing Mr. Anderson's argument, and Yuffie looked over at him. "Tough day?" she asked pleasantly, coming over to sit next to him. Riku cracked open an eyelid as he gazed at her. "Not too tough for a wielder of the Keyblade," he joked. Yuffie and Axel chuckled, and Riku laughed with them. The sight of Yuffie's black hair swaying with her head as she laughed sent a warm feeling to Riku's heart, and he smiled to hide his confusion. "What's going on?" he thought to himself. Before he could probe deeper into his mind, a warning siren came on as they heard a voice blare through the speakers on the communication equipment. "This is PJ calling King Mickey aboard the Avenger and Axel on the Destiny Islands. Message, over." Immediately Axel sprang to life and put the transmitter on video. Riku grabbed his water bottle and took a swig, not fazed by the sudden noise. "This is Axel," Axel said, going through the proper radio etiquette. "Calling PJ. Go ahead. Over." They saw on the screen PJ sitting in his room in the guardhouse. He looked kind of like Pete, except he was smaller than his dad, wore a red shirt over a pair of blue jeans. A moment later, after the king had completed his greeting, the screen split into two, and so an image of King Mickey, Donald, and Goofy aboard the bridge of their ship, also appeared. "What's going on, PJ?" King Mickey asked gravely. "And why did you include Axel in your transmission?" "What?" Axel said, offended. "Am I not good enough to be included in these powwows, Your Majesty?" Riku inclined his head towards Yuffie. "This kind of thing happen often?" he whispered. Yuffie grinned and nodded her head. "Yep," she said brightly, "and it's always fun to watch." Riku nodded and offered her a swig of water. "Well, Your Majesty," PJ answered quickly, "in order to avoid a certain pyro's demise, this information concerns the islands as well." Riku saw Mickey gave Axel a stern glare before turning towards his informant. "Get on with it, PJ." The boy sighed sadly as he turned away from his king and looked at the island's group. Riku raised his eyebrows and took another swig of his water bottle. "Maleficent sent Cossacks to destroy you guys," he said bluntly. Riku spat out the water he was drinking, spraying it all over Axel's back. "Say what?" Riku exclaimed. Axel swiveled in his chair around and glared at Riku. "You did that on purpose," he taunted, fire engulfing him and drying his clothes off. Suddenly he registered what PJ had said and quickly swelled back. "Say what?" he yelled, repeating Riku. Yuffie appeared quite distressed as she teetered on the edge of her seat. "Why does she want to destroy us?" she asked. "It's all to get Sora and Kairi," PJ said sadly. "Maleficent doesn't want to destroy you three, just practically everything and everyone else. She even ordered Cossacks to personally kill their parents. She believes when they find out, they'll throw caution to the winds and rush to the castle, seeking vengeance. Then she'll be able to capture them and turn Sora into a Heartless." Donald quacked at the indignation. "We can't let her do that," he squawked. "But how?" Goofy asked, scratching his head. "We're days away from the islands. We'd never make it in time." "Well, actually," PJ started, "Cossack said right before she left that she'd draw the islands into a false sense of security first, so you probably have a few days." "I doubt you'd be much help, Your Majesty, even if you did make it in time," Yuffie said. "We saw what you Cossacks can do at the party we threw for Sora and Kairi. Even after they had left, she continued to use her powers on the crowd. It seems as if only the Princesses of Heart can withstand her mental breaking powers, or whatever it is." PJ nodded and turned to look at King Mickey. "She speaks the truth, Your Highness," he said. "When Cossacks came back that night, she was raving about how Kairi and Naminé were immune to her powers. Then Maleficent explained that the light in their hearts protects them. Anyone from darkness, no matter how small, wouldn't be effective. Then we'll have to stop her before she can do such a dastardly deed," Axel roared, slamming a fist into his hands. "We'll place a guard on Anne, Seymour, and Janet, just in case." "No!" King Mickey ordered. "They must not know their lives are threatened. We must keep this between us, and you three must have to keep constant watch. If any of the Heartless that she's gathering show up, gather all of those on the islands who can fight and meet her. You have to stop her by show of force before she can reach their parents." Riku folded his arms and looked at the Mouse King. "And should she break through and—" Riku began to choke on his words. "Kill Sora and Kairi's parents and destroy the islands?" King Mickey looked grimly at them. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Riku looked sadly and began thinking of what would happen if she won. "Aw, cheer up, Riku," Goofy said in a comforting tone. "Yeah!" Donald piped up. "Like we told Sora, nobody can beat you." Riku gave a half-hard chuckle. "Sora and Roxas can," he said glumly. "And if Cossacks can beat them, then she can beat—" Yuffie smacked him on the head. "Ow!" Riku exclaimed as he rubbed his silver-clad head. Stop thinking like that, Yuffie sternly ordered. We'll get through this. We have to. Otherwise, Sora and Kairi will get so angry with us. That's kind of the plan, too, PJ said slowly, rubbing his head. That's why Maleficent ordered that you three are not to be killed. Axel groaned and threw his arms up in the air. Could today get any better? He asked vainly. Well, PJ began again. Don't tell me there is actually more, Axel asked in shock. PJ smiled half-heartedly at them. She's also sent Nixian and Pete to capture the rest of the princesses, PJ said, except for Kairi and Sora. Kosix and Nixian are to get them after the others are here. A small beeping sound from the king's dashboard, and he looked down. We'll have to cut this off, he said. We're approaching the next world. I'll leave it to you three to sort this out. Good luck. On that note, half of the screen that displayed the king and his companions flickered out. PJ logged off as well, and a new look appeared on Riku's face. If we fail, he said slowly, glumly hanging his head, his water bottle forgotten, Sora's going to be so pissed. A little time later, Sora landed the high wind back in the Radiant Garden. Yari had reasoned with Kairi the previous night while they toasted to victory on Rufio's memory that a hero needed to be comfortable to save the worlds, or at least his clothes needed to be comfortable. So, why are we here again? Max asked as they strode down the landing ramp. Kairi shook her head in exasperation. We told you before, Max, she said. We're here so that Sora and I can learn a few spells and magic from Merlin. On Sora's last adventures, Donald had always cleaned their clothes and all the blood and mud and gunk that got stuck on them, and Donald learned everything he knows from Merlin. So since we don't know where Donald is exactly, we're going to see Merlin. Max sighed as Kairi and Sora walked further away through the marketplace. You guys do that, he called, turning his back on them. I'll just train the simulator and hang out here. Sora turned his head and stared at Max while he walked away with Kairi. Chicken wuss, Roxas said. Sora shook his head as they strolled through the marketplace. He just feels left out. Sora muted. We need to think of something to do that we all can do together, instead of just carrying me. Roxas responded with some kind of remark. Sora wasn't listening. An object in one of the stalls had caught his eye. It was a silver pendant. It was shaped just like his crown one. There were two main differences, though. One, there was a pink tinge to it, and two, there was a small heart embossed in the center, the right size for a small engraving. I should get that one as a Sweet 16 present for Kairi, he thought. He quickly strode up to the stall, while Kairi was off heading towards the burrow. How much is the crown pendant? Sora asked hurriedly. The shopkeeper whose tag said her name was Jessie smiled at him. Got someone in mind for it? She asked. Sora nodded hastily and glanced over his shoulder to check that Kairi wasn't approaching. Well, the base itself is 800 money, but an engraving costs extra. How much does the engraving cost? Sora asked. Jessie shrugged. Depends on the length of the engraving. Well, he said quickly as he leaned in, could you put Kairi on the front, and on the back put down, have a Sweet 16, love Sora? Jessie wrote it all down on a piece of paper and looked it over. Okay, she said, as she made calculations in her head. The pendant is 600 money, engraving 500 money, plus tax. Your total comes to 1,232 money. The girl then smiled knowingly at Sora. Is she worth it? Sora pulled out the money bag Max had filled for him in Neverland. Even if it cost me all the money in the world, he responded as he placed the bag on the counter, I'd still gladly pay for it. Here you go. Here you are. 1,232 money. On the button. When will it be ready? She took the money and placed it as well as the pendant under the counter. Tomorrow afternoon, she said pleasantly. Sora thanked her and promised he'd be back tomorrow to pick it up before dashing off after Kairi. What were you doing, Sora? Kairi asked as soon as he caught up with her outside of Merlin's house. Sora instantly began sweating bullets as he turned Kairi away. Oh, nothing, he said quickly in a shaky voice. Kairi sighed as Sora let her in. Obviously she wasn't about to find out what he had been doing. The place looked exactly the same as when they left it, except Merlin was inside the time. He looked around when he heard them enter. Back so soon, eh, Sora? Merlin said, motioning them for to sit in a couple of chairs he conjured out of nowhere. They took their preferred seats, and helped themselves to some tea that Merlin's magic cutlery was making. "We need your help, Merlin," Sora began, sipping his tea after the sugar had but 2 scoops in. The wizard raised his eyebrows at Sora and looked between him and Carrie. "Really?" he asked humorously. "What with?" "Well," Carrie said, "we need some magic training." Merlin looked splendidly and excitedly at the prospect of having pupils again. "Excellent," the wizard said, instantly hopping up to his feet and grabbing his bag of holding. "Well, let's not waste time. You two need to get back on your quest pretty soon, I'm sure." He stopped and turned back to the 2 teens. "The quest is on hold for the moment, isn't it?" Sora smiled at him as he began to follow Merlin with Kyrie. "Yeah, we're pretty sure we can take a few days off," he said brightly, stepping out into the sunlight. "The king is out there with Donald and Goofy, after all." "Yeah," Kyrie added. "The worlds will be fine for a couple days." Merlin nodded his head. Yes, he said, stroking his beard as they walked towards the castle postern. "You're both quite right." They strolled in silence into a courtyard that was beginning to bloom with flowers, and Sora raised his eyebrows. "This place truly has changed a lot," he said, eyeing the postern's new look. It had a circular platform, but now it had walkways of cobblestones between lawns and grass and bustling flower beds. Harry knelt down to smell some of the flowers, and Sora's heart melted as he smelled her sweet vanilla perfume again. She sure is one of a kind, he thought to himself. He was suddenly brought back to the here and now when Merlin spoke. "Now," the wizard began, stroking his beard, "what sort of magic had you planned on learning?" Sora started rubbing the back of his head while Kyrie turned her head to look at him. It was an idea, after all. "Well," Sora began, unsure of how Merlin would take it, "I was thinking of some kind of cleaning spell, and anything else you'd like to throw in." Merlin chuckled heartily at Sora. "Something as simple as that?" he roared. My lad, I hardly expect such a simple spell request from you." "Hey," Sora retorted, plucking on his vest. "That's not fair. I don't have Donald with me anymore, and do you know just how dirty and stained our clothes get on all our adventures?" Merlin wiped a tear of mirth from his eyes. "I'm sorry, my boy," he said weakly. "I'd forgotten you didn't have the court magician with you." Merlin swiftly recovered and pulled out a brown wand. "Now, I assume you both can cast magic without a wand or a keyblade out, correct?" Sora and Carrie nodded their heads. Carrie hadn't used much magic without a keyblade, yet she still used her light without casting it. "Very good," Merlin continued. "Then it will be easier when I teach you to cast magic soundlessly. That way your opponent won't be able to tell which spell you're casting, unless you want them to know, of course. But the charm I shall teach you now," Merlin said with a flourish, as he saw their interest peak when he mentioned mutely casting spells, "is an all-around cleaning spell. Just will whatever you want to be fresh and clean, and maybe have a soft fragrance. Say the spell, and it will be clean." "Great," Sora explained, eager to get the clothes he was wearing clean for once. "What's the incantation?" As an answer, Merlin pointed a wand at the pile of dirt that was sitting on the cobblestones nearby. "Scroogiffy," he said. A light blue orb formed on the tip of his wand and shot at the dirt. It instantaneously disappeared, and Sora looked on in amazement as Merlin turned to his pupils. "Now, you try it." Sora nodded and placed his hand over his chest, deeply feeling the want for his clothes to become clean, as when Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather made them, with a slight smell of cinnamon and mint. "Scroogiffy," he whispered with his eyes closed. He could tell the magic had worked when a soft blue light filtered in through his eyelids, and he breathed in the desired scent that now adorned his clothes. Sora stood in silence for a minute, breathing in the air about him like a calming drink and appreciating his newfound softness of the fabric had now taken. He slowly opened his eyes when he felt someone breathe on his face and a tug on his vest. Carrie was standing in front of him, almost hanging onto his clothes as she gulped in the scent and rested her head against his soft shoulder. "Sora," she said lightheartedly, "how do you smell so good?" Sora chuckled at her and raised her head to kiss her waiting lips. "Because," he whispered, bending his forehead onto hers, Your perfume is the nicest fragrance I've ever smelled, and I want to be the best thing you ever smell. Carrie giggled at him and briefly kissing his lips again. You're cute when you're all gushy, Sora, she whispered. Merlin cleared his throat behind them and they broke up suddenly. Now, I know you two are in love, he said sternly, but not as sternly when he talks to Sid. But if you two are going to learn advanced magic that I'm going to teach you, you can't break up for every cuddle every 5 minutes. Sora smiled bashfully at Merlin and rubbed the back of his head while Carrie stepped a few paces away from him and shuffled her boots, beige-green ones similar to Yuffie's that went a quarter of the way up her legs. Sorry, Merlin, Carrie said. It's my fault. Merlin nodded his head at her. It's quite all right, Carrie, he said. I'll allow it this time, because that was a simple spell, and when I mentioned it about smells, it probably would have encouraged either of you. The two teens blushed slightly and glanced at each other. Now then, are you ready to continue? Merlin asked. Sora and Carrie looked away from each other and nodded their heads. We're ready, Sora declared. Excellent, the wizard said and looked up at the sky. You two did pick a rather inconvenient time to drop by. It's almost dusk. He dropped his gaze and looked back at his pupils. Now, I'm going to try and teach you something about vanishing and appearing spells before the sun goes down. The day ended quickly as Merlin taught them the magic. Sora and Kyrie didn't master the vanishing spell at first, and they were instructed by Merlin to keep practicing, as they couldn't learn to make an object reappear as if they had vanished it in the first place. They strode wearily through the town, searching for a nice place to sup for the night. As Sora wasn't feeling up to cooking, they stopped in front of a cafe with a striped red and white overhang on the building with a quaint outdoor section. Sora pressed a finger to his ear and to contact Max. Hey Max, he began. Yeah, Sora, came the reply. You want to eat out with me and Carrie tonight? Sora asked pleasantly, the stack of the device buzzing in his ear. Sure thing, where are you guys? Carrie placed her finger on her ear to join in. We're at the 7th heaven, she said. Sure thing, I'll be right over. They waited outside on a bench for Max to begin and began talking about the vanishing spell they were supposed to practice for Merlin. So, how well did your ruby vanish, Carrie? Carrie shook her head and brought out. The ruby was still there, but it was half transparent. Not so well, she said with a slight giggle. I didn't know magic was going to be so difficult. Neither did I, Sora said, producing his own ruby. It was more significant than Carrie's, but had a small degree of transparency. Hey, Sora? Carrie asked with a pause. Why did you pick 7th heaven anyway? The boy placed his arms behind his head as they just began to make out the figure of Max coming towards them. I want to introduce you guys to Tifa, he said, standing up. This is her place. Max joined them as Carrie stood up, as well as the three of them walked into the 7th heaven. There were parlors in front of them in a rectangular fashion, and tables adorned the wings of the purple cushions on the chairs and benches. At the back there was a bar/kitchen, and directly in front of them of the trio was a pedestal where a girl with brown hair held back by a few pink ribbons was standing. Table for 3? The girl asked. The trio nodded. Do you have a reservation? They don't need a reservation, Marlene, they heard someone call. They're our friends. Sora turned his head to see a girl around 20 with long black hair, wearing a t-shirt and a long skirt, both black, waving at them from behind the bar. Welcome, Sora, she said as the three of them walked up to the bar and took seats on the bar stools. How's it going, Tifa? Sora asked as Tifa got him water. Found Cloud yet? Tifa sighed and shook her head. Not yet, she said brightly. I'm heading out to look again. But who are those two? Tifa turned her attention between Max and Carrie, then looked back at Sora. He looks like Goofy, but I haven't seen her before. Oh, right, Sora said after he took a sip of his water. This is Max, Goofy's son. Max and Tifa shook hands, and Sora wrapped his arm around Kyrie, who giggled a little as her water spilled a little on the bar. And this, Sora continued, gazing into her eyes, is my girlfriend Kyrie. Tifa smiled and shook Kyrie's hand. You're breaking a lot of hearts, Sora, Tifa said with her arms crossed. Sora chuckled as he squeezed Kyrie a little tighter. "We already did that when we were here a day or two ago," he said, remembering that they had only spent about 3 minutes in Neverland. Tifa raised an eyebrow at them, and Carrie giggled. "We kissed in front of a mob of rabid fangirls," she said, giving Sora a quick peck on the cheek. Tifa shook her head at them, although she smiled warmly. "That would do it," she sighed before addressing Carrie herself. "So, you're fighting too?" "Yep," Carrie answered brightly, drawing the Oathkeeper. "I've got my own Keyblade." Tifa giggled slightly. "We can't leave it up to the boys all the time, can we?" she asked, and Carrie nodded. "I mean, you have your own Keyblade, Yuffie wields her giant shuriken, Aerith has a quarterstaff, and I use my fists." They spent hours in the seventh heaven just talking with Tifa and eating whatever she offered on the house. Tifa seemed to think that it was a great idea for them to open a restaurant after their adventures are over, just as long as it didn't take business away from the seventh heaven. After a time, Leon and the whole gang showed up and joined in, and a crowd also drew around them as Sora recounted his tales. He and Kairi had come to understanding that even though they did not know the situations of the islands, they knew they would be safe because Riku was there. "And now," he concluded, we're studying with Merlin for a few days before continuing our journey." "Remember, Sora," Merlin advised, taking a sip of his milkshake, "you and Kairi still need to practice that vanishing spell." Yeah, Sora said as he produced his ruby again and began to concentrate. Evanesco, he said. Miraculously, the ruby vanished. Kairi beamed at him in admiration. She had already managed to vanish hers while they had been talking to Tifa. "Looks like things are looking up." Riku awoke the next morning with a pang as he remembered the conversation they had with PJ the previous day, and the ensuing planning session the three of them held immediately after. The current plan was not to tell anyone about what was going on, but post washes near the edge of the town as a warning system. "I pity the forest souls who will be on the first line," he thought as he left early for school, disregarding his parents' remarks on how he should eat breakfast first. Stepping out of his house, Riku summoned forth Way to the Dawn, its red blade shimmering in the early morning light as the Heartless emblem keychain dangled from the end. He walked swiftly, barely pausing to exterminate the very few soldier Heartlesses that had appeared to block his way. Soon a small trickle of students began leaving their homes to get to school, many of them wielding some form of object that could be used as a weapon. Two soldiers suddenly appeared in front of Riku, clacking about in their overlarge iron helmets and boots. Riku smirked as he deftly sliced his Keyblade through them faster than a eye can blink. The followers had stood stunned as the soldiers disappeared in puffs of smoke, two pink hearts rising into the sky. PJ was right, Riku thought sadly. Cossacks does seem to be lightening the pressure. A small boy suddenly ran up to Riku. "Hey," he said, his face beaming. "That was amazing." The boy suddenly became rather shy and scuffed his shoes on the cobblestone. "Do you think," he asked shyly, "I could hold your sword, sir?" Riku chuckled at him and knelt down, offering his Keyblade to the boy. Poor kid, he thought in shame, though his smile displayed it not. "I only took down two of the weakest Heartless, and he's fawning over me. Whatever she has in store is going to be a million times worse." Riku told the boy that he had to leave for school, and summoned Way to the Dawn back into his hand. The boy didn't seem disappointed, though, and he ran off to tell all his little friends what he had just seen. Riku noticed that the students who had come out of their homes were congregating around him, knowing that they would be safe around him. He sighed and shook his head, heading off for the school again. Riku arrived without further incident, arriving at the front doors to find Yuffie waiting for him. Together they ushered the teens that had been following Riku, and as soon as all of them were safely indoors, they turned to each other. "So, how's your trip to school this morning?" Yuffie asked. "Too easy," Riku replied. "If those guys," he said, meaning the students who had just entered the building, "blocked me for protection when the Heartless are this weak, then we're really screwed when Cossacks finally attacks us." "Don't think like that," Yuffie scolded. "We can't let her kill their parents. We just can't." Uncomfortable sounds passed between them. "Do you always think like this?" Yuffie asked as she broke the silence. Riku barked a laugh. "Ever since that summer," he replied. "Maybe Sora's right. Maybe I have been hanging out in the darkness for too long." Yuffie strode up to him and poked him in the chest. "It's high time you started living in the realm of light," she ordered. "Come on," she said cheerily. "Let's go inside. I have a class to teach, and you have one to go to, too." "Yeah, sure," Riku said unsteadily, as he rubbed the spot where she had poked him. He didn't immediately follow her, as the spot where she had touched felt strange. It didn't hurt, but it felt weird, as if butterflies were flitting about inside, and what she said was sticking in his mind. He wasn't living in the realm of light. Not really. He was used to the darkness and was unsure about the light. Light revealed things the darkness kept hidden, like emotions that were unknown or whoever might be lurking inside it. So like Xehanort's heartless that was still inside of him, buried deep down. But one might live in both, in the twilight between light and darkness. Then Riku suddenly remembered something someone else had said to him. "But who," Riku asked in vain, "carries the light to balance my darkness?" He lifted his head and looked through the main door's windows at the waving figure of Yuffie. Riku strode forward and opened the doors to follow her. Maybe. The day passed quickly, and the Radiant Garden and the Destiny Islands. Sora and Kairi had mastered vanishing and reappearing spells, summoning charms, conjuring, which culminated in Kairi and Merlin arguing for 15 minutes about the most fundamental law of the universe, that matter cannot be created nor destroyed, with Merlin winning by correcting Kairi that it was energy that could not be created or destroyed, and the matter that could be created through using energy. Indeed, that was how the universe itself was created. How to cast spells without uttering a single word, which took longer to master than either of them had expected, and the duo had also created a limit for themselves. "Excellent," Merlin said as he clapped his hands after they had demonstrated it. "You two really put a lot of effort into it, didn't you?" Tifa asked, as she and the whole gang had stopped by to watch the training. Sora and Kairi nodded heartily, grinning at each other. "Well," Merlin said, "I think that'll be enough for now. You two should be prepared to face anything on your journey." Sora and Kairi bowed. "Thanks, Merlin," Kairi said. Merlin waved her praise off with a flick of his wrist. "No trouble at all, my dear." Leon began rubbing his chin. "So, where are you two planning on heading?" he asked. "I was thinking of Twilight Town first," Sora announced. "We can see Hainer, Pence, and Olit again, then Land of Dragons or the Colosseum." You might want to add Beast Castle into the early part of that list," Leon advised. "The king called, and he said that Maleficent is sending her henchmen out to capture the princesses." Sora and Kairi and Max nodded their heads. "Okay," Kairi relented. "We'll go to Twilight Town first, then Beast Castle." Leon nodded as they walked away, giving their farewells. "So, tell me, Prime Minister," Sid asked after they had vanished from the postern, "why didn't you tell them about the plot on their home islands?" "King Mickey said not to tell them," Leon answered. Sid huffed at this news as Merlin stroked his long white beard. "The king is very secretive as of late," he observed. Sora and company strolled through the town until they eventually found themselves in the marketplace, nearby where they had landed the Highwind. Just a second, guys," Sora said hurriedly as he fell back. "I just remembered I have to do something. I'll be right back." Kairi and Max exchanged glances and shrugged before heading up the landing ramp into the ship. Sora ran back through the marketplace until he reached the stall where he bought Kairi's birthday present. He could see that Jessie was still working today. "Jessie!" Sora called in haste. As she turned her head to see him running flat out to reach her, Sora approached the stall, not even panting for breath. "Is it ready?" As an answer, Jessie reached under the counter and pulled the pendant out and placed it in Sora's hand. "Does it look ready?" Jessie added humorously. Sora turned the pendant over in his hand. The engravings in the slightly pink metal were perfectly crafted, the words in sharp contrast to the smooth exterior. Jessie smiled at him. "She must be a very lucky girl to have someone like you," she commented. Sora shook his head and briefly muttered, Evan Seco, under his breath. Jessie's eyes grew wide as she saw the pendant disappear in a white shimmer. "No," Sora said as he brought his head up to look at Jessie before he walked out. I'm a very lucky guy to have a girl like her." Riku had another tiring day. It wasn't, though, just boring. He had aced a math test, actually gotten high marks on his biology essay, beat everyone in a track race while stopping to take out a few Heartless that had made an appearance on the track, and floored everyone in his weapons training class, which was now being taught by Yuffie and Axel, as all the other teachers of that course had been called out by Seymour to patrol the streets. The mayor still had no idea that his daughter's enemy was gathering on his doorstep as the king had requested, and nearly everybody else was beginning to think that the crisis was abating as fewer and fewer Heartless appeared throughout the day. "I'll give you one more day," Axel told to Riku in his Block 2 class. "One more day of calm that shall hit us with everything at night." Riku had looked skeptically at him. "What makes you say that?" he asked. Axel barked laugh at him. "I was a nobody and I was under Xemnas. I know how they think. Got it memorized?" Yuffie, though she hid the fact that she was worried very easily from her pupils, was of similar mind. "She'll attack us soon," she whispered to Riku after the class was over, "and they aren't ready to take it." Riku grabbed her upper arm and forced her to look at him. "Look at me," he ordered. "We already have me thinking this way. We don't need another me." Yuffie suddenly nestled herself in the crook of his shoulder, and Riku was surprised at how well she fit there. He stood startled for a few minutes before he began stroking her back comfortingly. "Shush," he shushed her. He shushed quietly. "We'll get through this. We aren't going to die, and neither are Sora and Kairi's parents." "That's not what I'm afraid of," Yuffie said quietly, her brown eyes full of worry. "I'm not afraid of us dying. I'm just afraid of seeing someone else young like us die." The next afternoon, the Highwind landed by the train station in Twilight Town, and the three teens inside walked out into the perpetual twilight. The place was exactly as Sora remembered it. The brickwork of the buildings, the giant clock tower on the station, and the great sun in dusk, despite it being the middle of the day. The three walked swiftly through Market Street towards the back alley, where a hanging red carpet concealed the entrance to the usual spot, where the Twilight Town gang hung out. Sora pulled back the curtain and walked in to see a spiky blonde, blue-eyed boy wearing camo jeans and a gray shirt sitting up on a radiator, a girl with short brown hair, green eyes, wearing a white flower patterned orange shirt and gray shorts sitting on a red love seat, and a boy with yellow eyes, black hair held up above his head by a black headband, wearing a red jersey and blue jeans, relaxing on a blue armchair. The usual spot itself was a golden color, with posters stuck up here and there, and a dartboard stuck up on the wall, with a couple of wooden swords also rested in the corner. The three teens inside looked up and smiled excitedly as Sora entered, closely followed by Kairi. "You guys made it back," the one wearing a jersey said as the girl leapt up and embraced Kairi. "Of course we did, Pence," Sora said as the girl released Kairi and gave Sora a hug as well. We were worried about you," the girl said as she let go of Sora as Max was walking in. "Especially after that guy with spiky red hair took you away, Kairi." "Don't worry, Olette," Kairi said. "I'm perfectly fine now." Sora looked at his girlfriend. They both grinned at each other. The blonde one raised an eyebrow as he looked in between their faces. Is there anything that happened between the two of you that we should know about?" he asked. Kairi smirked as she slowly paced toward Sora. "Now that you mention it, Hayner," she said delicately. Kairi nestled herself into the crook of Sora's shoulder, and despite the fact that they were the same height, she fit perfectly, and Kairi pecked his cheek. "What does this tell you what happened?" She finished her sentence as she looked at the three she had briefly met. Olette's emerald eyes melted as she cupped her hands together and placed them by her cheek. "I knew you two would get together after you told us your story, Kairi," she said. She sighed dreamily. Max cleared his throat to clarify his presence. "Hello," he said in a humorously annoyed tone. He had learned to live with Sora and Kairi's behavior after a while. "Third wheel here, and waiting to be introduced." Sora smiled apologetically, and Kairi blushed a little. They had both forgotten to introduce him. "Sorry, Max," Sora said. "Hayner, Pence, Olette," Sora said, indicating each of them respectively. "This is our friend Max." Max stepped forward and shook hands with the three teens from Twilight Town. "And before you ask," Max said quickly, "yes, Goofy is my father." "So, Max," Hayner asked suddenly, "have you ever struggled before?" Max looked inquiringly at him, as if silently saying, "Struggled?" Max Hayner chuckled at him. "It's a fighting sport we have here in town," Hayner explained, as he dragged Max off towards the sandlot. "Hey, there's a tournament today," Pence said. "Maybe you should sign up, Sora." Sora mulled it over for a second and looked at Pence. "All right," he said, "on one condition." He then turned to Kyrie. "Kyrie joins too." She smiled and took his arm. "I'd be happy to." Seymour, Janet, and Anne were all in the mayor's office, half celebrating the apparent withdrawal of Heartless, half wondering where their children were. "I think I should change my position's name," Seymour chuckled. "And why would you do that?" Anne asked with a chuckle. "When was the last time a mayor governed the defense of this town?" he returned smugly, seeing Janet's smile as he continued. "I think instead of Mayor Seymour, I should at least be Meister Seymour. Sounds more impressive, I think." Suddenly the dedicated line that went to Axel and Yuffie's command center rang. "Meister Seymour speaking. What is it?" Seymour said as he answered it. Anne and Janet looked inquiry as Seymour nodded his head and muttered, "Uh-huh," several times. "Right, get on with it." He set the receiver down and looked at the two women in his office. "What is it?" Janet asked, concerned. "Heartless have been spotted on the radar, just outside of town." Riku was running through the streets, way to the dawn drawn as the afternoon sun beat down on him and the 15 boys he had at his back rounding a corner. Riku found himself near the outskirts where Yuffie and Axel were waiting with 50-some-odd around them. "What's the plan, Yuffie?" he asked as he dashed up to them, those who were following him joining the ranks. Yuffie scooted over a little to show him the screen she and Axel were hovering over. "This computer has a direct uplink to our screen in the control room," Axel stated as Riku looked at it. Right now we're looking here at the northern section of the town, where Heartless are marching towards us. Indeed, the screen, there were hundreds of little red dots, almost a solid mass of red, about 2 clicks away to the north. With them were 2 orange dots, and where they stood was a very small mass of green that resembled them, and 3 blue dots all huddled in one spot. Riku zoomed out to view the whole map and saw that there were at least 20 more green dots hastened towards the location, and 3 yellow ones in the mayor's office. "Green is for ally," Yuffie explained. "Blue is for us 3. Yellow are our VIPs. Red is enemy, duh. Orange are our enemy bosses, and the purple dot will be Cossacks, but she hasn't shown up yet." Riku gritted his teeth as he watched the Heartless slowly come closer, and a few more green dots arrive and join the mass. "She'll wait till we're exhausted," Riku growled. "There's going to be no end to this." "Oh, there'll be an end," Axel said with the maniac gleam in his teal eyes. Fire erupted around his palms, and his 2 flaming red, spiky chakrams appeared in his hand. "The end will be when we've destroyed them all." "Hey, Riku, Miss Yuffie, Mr. Axel," Titus yelled as he ran up with Waka, the Blitz team, and the rest of his weapons training class. "What do you want us to do?" Everyone leaned in as they began paying attention. This was going to be the fight of their lives, and they needed to know what to do. "All right," Axel said quickly as he partially zoomed the screen back in on the northern section of the town. The Heartless were approaching. Fast. They were only 1.5 kilometers away, and nobody was defending the northern flank. "Yuffie and Axel will take up the front here," he said, pointing towards the most northern section of the town, closest to the approaching red mass. "I'll lay back here and try to determine which way the battle is going, and join in if necessary. Titus, you and your group will hold this section." Yuffie grabbed Riku's arm and pulled him away from the scheming Axel. "Come on," she said, shouldering her shuriken. "We're the front line." Riku nodded and swiftly followed her figure, weaving through the buildings as they hastened to their position, sliding his back against the side of a store that was the last building facing north. Riku glanced on the oncoming army of Heartless, and his eyes widened. Not all of them were Heartless. There were standard Heartless varieties: armored knights, soldiers, shadows, large bodies, lance soldiers, bronze figures that wielded cursed lands that poked at fun at the individual soldiers, and guard dogs, but there were also stronger ones Riku hadn't seen in a long time, such as Invisibles, tall hulking black Heartless that floated above the ground and wielded large swords, and at least two behemoths. A giant purple rhino-like heartless with a horn atop their heads. This enough would have been enough cause for concern. But there were nobodies as well. Dancers flitted about in the front ranks, with dusks making their strange walk behind them, and berserkers were intermixed within the whole army. Riku took all this in within a few seconds, and he withdrew his head and cursed. "Shit," he breathed. "We're all going to die." Yuffie looked over at him from the building she was hiding behind, having observed the army herself. "Riku," she said shakily, "despite Kosek's orders not to kill us, if this is our last day alive..." Yuffie's voice suddenly caught, and she became unsure if she was going to continue. Riku raised an eyebrow and pressed her onwards. "If this is our last day alive," Yuffie repeated, and she raised her head up to his eyes. I'm glad to have known you." Riku was stunned as he stared at the suddenly cute girl before him. He had wrestled within himself at how he felt about her, and he realized that she felt the same way. Riku was suddenly stunned at how he found his feet disobeying conscious thought, and he moved across the road towards Yuffie. She backed away slightly nervous as Riku suddenly grabbed her hands with his. Riku said, suddenly finding his tongue extremely dry. "I feel the same." Both their faces slowly came together and their lips touched, creating magic between them. Riku deepened into the moment as Yuffie began kissing him back. While their lips were locked, after what seemed like an eternity, they broke their kiss. "Wow," Yuffie breathed quietly as she smiled up at Riku. "I had no idea you felt." She suddenly stopped as her emotions took over, and she threw her arms around his neck and began kissing him again. Another eternity passed as they kissed until they finally came apart. "Yuffie," Riku asked quietly, taking her hand, "will you be my girlfriend?" Yuffie giggled at him. "Oh, I will, oh pie lover." Riku grinned and suddenly swung around and blocked Lance's soldier lance from skewering him with his reappearing keyblade. Riku kicked the lance's shaft away and stabbed the heartless right through the center, and it vanished with a puff of smoke and a fiery pink heart. A dancer approached him, and Riku jumped up to avoid it, grabbing him by the ankles. He twirled through the air and sliced his keyblade right through its head, taking out the armored knight that was behind it as well in flashes of white and black. "Hey, Yuffie," he called after he landed and began to vanquish foes left and right. "What was that you said about dying?" Yuffie snarled as she threw several regular-sized shurikens right into the bodies of several dust and soldiers. "Fuck death," she steamed. "I'm going to live." Riku grinned as he watched Yuffie throw her trademark shuriken around like a boomerang, slicing the heads off of nobodies and heartless alike, only for them to disappear in flashes of white and black. But he didn't have time to watch for long, as a lone berserker came up in front of him and tried to smack him with its claymore. Riku rolled around on the ground to get behind it and leaped up, cleaving it through with way to the Dawn's blade. As soon as it disappeared, Riku felt his knees buckle from a shockwave as one of the two behemoths approached to squash them like bugs. It lowered its head to skewer them with its large black horn that was covered in a blue mist. "Yuffie," Riku ordered, "attack the horn. That's its weak point." Yuffie nodded as she blocked a blow an invisible was making at her with its long blue sword with her shuriken. As it recoiled, she pulled out a dagger out of her belt and leapt up, running the blade through its head. As the invisible faded, Yuffie sheathed the dagger as she threw the shuriken at the behemoth's horn. It circled around and constantly whacking the barrier away from the horn until there was nothing left. The heartless fell onto its knees, stunned. "Hope that helped," Yuffie said as she grabbed her weapon back and began melee fighting with it and her dagger. Riku leapt right up at the horn and sliced it clean off with a slash from his keyblade. The behemoth roared as it exploded in darkness, a giant heart rising into the sky. Riku turned around to see some of the heartless escaping past them and heading into the town. He raised his palm and sent black and blue fireballs out of his tips toward them, incinerating the heartless. "Yuffie," he asked as he turned his attention back to the foes in front, "how do you like your heartless, skewered or sliced?" She giggled at him as she stabbed the dagger right through an armored head, twirled it around in her palm, and stabbed through the soldier's helmet that was behind her. "I prefer minced," she joked as she sent her shuriken flying again, ripping anything in its path to shreds. It was going to be one hell of an afternoon. "The rules of the tournament are as follows," the struggle promoter in the Sandlot of Twilight Town said. "Each combatant will have 100 orbs, totaling 200 for the match. All you have to do is hit your opponent with your weapon, and they will drop orbs. The one with the most orbs at the end of 1 minute time limit is the winner. Or if either combatant can gather all 200 orbs, they automatically win. If either combatant falls out of the ring, they are automatically disqualified." Everyone in the Sandlot nodded in understanding, and the struggle promoter handed each of the 8 contestants a blue bat with a golden grip and wished them luck. "So," Sora said as he turned to Kairi and Max, "who are you fighting in the first round?" "I'm fighting some guy named Rai," she said confidently. Sora grinned. "Rai's kind of slow," he said. "He should be an easy fight." "I've got some guy named Setzer," Max spoke. Sora nodded at him. "Setzer is an okay opponent," he commented, "but he's no match for you, Max." "Hey, chicken wuss!" someone taunted behind them. Sora, Kairi, and Max turned around to see a boy wearing a black toque, blue jeans, and a white vest holding an ornate blue trophy with 4 crystals, blue, red, green, and yellow. "Remember this?" he asked. "I gave it to you last time you were here, but I'm winning it back." "In your dreams, Cypher," Sora challenged. 2 people came up behind Cypher and posed before Sora and Kairi. One was a tan boy with black hair, wearing a red shirt. The other was a girl with violet-white hair, wearing a lilac shirt and short beige pants. "Do you know them, Sora?" Kairi asked, looking at the 3. He nodded his head at her. "Remember what I was telling you about Cypher, Rai, and Fu?" he asked. He raised his hand towards them. "These are them." "Yeah, you don't mess with us, you know," Rai said, baring his fists in front of her. "And I'm going to beat you in the first round, you know." Kairi glared Rai down. "No," she replied icily. "I don't know, and for the record, you won't have any balls left to count when I'm through with you." A look gasped at Kairi as Kairi stalked away from Cypher and his gang, who were thoroughly stunned. Despite the fact that Sora and Hainer weren't Axel, they took the moment to say something that all people across the world say whenever someone counters with a line like that. "Burn!" "All right, folks," the struggle announcer and weapon shop proprietor said. "Welcome to this weekend's struggle tournament. Remember, everyone, this last chance of the year to vie for the coveted 4-crystal trophy before the big struggle tournament in the summer. The winner of this tournament wins the trophy. That's bragging rights for almost a whole year, folks." He then turned his blonde head to the combatants. "Now, let's meet today's entrants, the 8 worthy strugglers who will face each other in the ring. Our first match, we have the beautiful Kairi. Now, don't kill anyone, Sora." He paused for laughs as Sora waved it off, receiving a friendly punch on the shoulder from Hainer and a quick smile from Kairi. "Gracefully fighting against the hulking Rai. I'm going to win it, you know." In the second match, we have the defending champion Cypher fighting one of his own boys. Let's give it up for Vivi. Sora began clapping as Vivi, a very small boy who wore a blue trench coat and a large brown hat that enveloped his face in shadow, began happily waving at everyone as Cypher scowled. In our third round, we have outsider Max going up against former champion Setzer. Max looked nervously at a man who had silver hair and a purple cloak, showing off for his fangirls, when the announcer drew his attention again. And our final match in the first round will be adventurer and master of the Keyblade, Sora, facing underground favorite and local attitude problem, Hainer. Sora and Hainer faced each other and pounded the other's outstretched fist. "Good luck, man," Hainer said, and Sora nodded. "Yeah," said he. "You too." "Would Kairi and Rai please come up to the ring?" the announcer asked, as the first round is about to begin. Kairi stepped forward and leapt up onto the square platform as Rai mounted the steps. She turned to see Sora blowing her a kiss, and she caught it, placing it on her lips. They both grinned at each other, and Kairi saw Sora whisper, Good luck. She nodded at him and turned to face Rai. This is so weird, Sora heard in his head as Carrie and Rai faced off. What's weird, Roxas? Just being back in Twilight Town, he said telepathically as Carrie flew off towards Rai, striking him in the gut with a crossfire blow, which sent him staggering as yellow orbs began flying about. I mean, Roxas continued, while Naminé was putting your memories back, I felt as if I was living my life out here, and no one here even knows me. Everyone knows you, Roxas, Sora thought as Carrie whacked on the back with her struggle bat, sending the last of Rai's orbs flying, and Rai reeling to the ground. Well, Sora compromised, not everyone here, but everyone in the virtual Twilight Town knows you. Could we go there? Roxas asked in wonder. If we have time, Sora thought. I'd actually like to get introduced to the Hainer, Pence, and Olette that you know, but if we don't have time this time here, I promise you that the next time I promise you that you will get there before the end of this journey. It's okay if we don't go now, Roxas said, but as long as we get there sometime soon, I'd like to introduce them to Naminé. Sora chuckled at nobody's response as he watched Carrie place her bat at Rai's chin in victory. I bet you would, Roxas, he thought. Vivi lost the next round by a score of 173 to 15, as there were still some orbs lying around, and Max conquered the initial fear of Setzer, whose taunts of "My life is a chip, you're a pile, time to ante up," shook Max, but he came back with an effective comeback to collect all 200 orbs. The announcer then called Sora and Hainer into the ring, and they squared each other off before flying into the fray. Sora quick run straight for Hainer and lunged at his figure, throwing in an upper slash for good measure to send Hainer flying into the air. As red orbs scattered around the ring, Sora leapt up and continually slashed Hainer in the air, sending him flying back into the center of the ring. Hainer landed in a daze, and Sora ran about, grabbing the orbs as fast as he could. Hainer recovered and came at Sora, his juggle back moving in blinding fury. Sora met his bat with his own, but his was faster, and after 4 circling parries, Sora hit Hainer again on the ribs, and the last of the red orbs came off and stuck themselves to Sora, making him the winner. The crowd cheered, and Carrie whistled as Sora raised his bat in the air. Good match, man, Hainer said, not at all surprised he had lost. I knew there was no way I could take you. Hey, Sora said comfortingly as he placed a hand on Hainer's shoulder. You improved a lot since the last time we struggled. How'd you know? Hainer asked skeptically as he crossed his arms. You knocked me off in only 15 seconds. Trust me, Hainer, Sora replied. I know you did. The next struggle match between you and Cypher, you're taking the cake. Well, Hainer said as he rubbed his chin while they descended off the platform and stood amongst their friends. I do love cake. You were amazing, Sora, Pence said. And now commences the semi-final round, the announcer began. Would Kyrie and Cypher please step into the ring? Kyrie stepped forward and climbed up into the square again. Going up the stairs is just too time-consuming after all. Cypher was already waiting for her, his bat poised in front of him like a barrel of a pistol. Kneel, loser, he taunted. Kyrie's blue eyes suddenly blazed as she gave Cypher a death glare, which he surprisingly resisted. Nobody calls me a loser, Kyrie snapped, a snarl curling on her upper lip. Without warning, she shot forwards and threw all her power into a slash at Cypher's bat. It contacted with a resounding crack, as it not only took it out of Cypher's hand, but broke the bat in half as well. Before he could even be put in shock, Kyrie kicked him in the gut hard. Cypher staggered back as a few green orbs dropped off, and he suddenly found himself on the ground outside of the ring. The announcer started. I'm not sure what just happened, but Kyrie is the winner. Would Sora and Max now like to step into the ring? Max suddenly looked at Sora as Kyrie leapt down to their level. Do you fight as well as Roxas? Max asked. Sora nodded. We're one the same, he responded. Right, Max said, nodding his head. I forfeit, Max abruptly said. Sora and the gang were stunned. You sure? Hainer asked. Max nodded his head. There's no possible way anyone in this tournament could beat either Sora or Kyrie, he said before shrugging his shoulders and grinning evilly. So I forfeit. That just speeds up to the climactic battle between the two lovers. He's right, you know, Carrie said to Sora. You would win, hands down. Well then, the announcer who had been listening into their conversation, would you two like to step into the ring then? Sora and Kairi nodded and walked forward together. The struggle promoter came up to them and presented them with 2 new bats. You two play fair now, he said. You two are the top of the brackets. Sora and Kairi took the bats, glanced at each other, and tossed them over their heads. Oathkeeper and appeared in Kairi's hands. The same time, the Oblivion appeared in Sora's, and they squared off, the promoting getting the heck out of the way. Just like on the islands, eh, Kairi? Sora asked as he gripped the Oblivion. She nodded her head. Remember our training, Sora? She asked with a mischievous gleam in her eyes. I won't hold back. Sora nodded and braced himself as she flew forward with the Oathkeeper. He raised his Keyblade upwards to parry her downward slash and struck at her side, Kairi twirling around to dodge and swinging her blade up near his neck, which Sora twitched to avoid, and he brought his own blade in a horizontal slash at her side. Kairi's Keyblade struck his own with both blades recoiled. The two backflipped over to gain some distance, and Sora wordlessly released a volley of ice shards at Kairi, who countered by raising a flame shield around herself, while he was partially blocked by the flames. Sora leapt up into the air and landed on Kairi's other side, and struck at her leather armor through the shield when his blade met steel with a clang. Kairi grinned at him as she dropped the encircling flames. I know you're far better than that to work. I know you far better than for that to work, Sora, she said as she threw his Keyblade off of hers and struck at his midriff. Sora went flat onto the ground before the blow could be struck and aimed an attack against Kairi's booted ankles. She leapt back to dodge the strike and sent a thunderbolt down from the sky towards Sora. He looked up and rolled in the nick of time to dodge it. Sora looked up again and instinctively used a Reflaga spell to ground the charge from another bolt into the platform. Before either could do more, the buzzer sounded, indicating that the time limit had been reached. Well, that was quite a show, the announcer said. I guess for the first time ever, we have 2 champions. Give them both the trophy. Sora and Kairi grinned as Hayner and the gang grabbed the 4-crystal trophy and ran up to present it to them, as well as lifting the 2 up onto their shoulders. The crowd cheered as they lifted their Keyblades into the air and kissed briefly, off to celebrate their taking the cup by storm. So, what is this? Sora asked. 3 draws and no wins for either of us? Riku panted and wiped sweat from his brow as he swiped way to the dawn through yet another armored knight. He and Yuffie had been fighting alone in the north for hours, and it had now grown into the night, never hearing a word from any other person on their side, never seeing a sign if the tide was relenting, and never gaining any rest or reinforcements. It was hell. Riku panted again and heaved his blade right through an invisible, before swinging it around and striking a berserker in the back before it could attack Yuffie. She muttered a hurried thanks before she hacked a shadow to pieces with her dagger. Riku suddenly felt pain against his shoulder as a guard dog bit him. He turned on the dog and ran his blade through its mouth and the top of its blue head before wearily blocking a armored knight's sword from slicing open his ribs and defeating it too. There's no end to this, he thought glumly, fire suddenly erupting from him and created a wall that protected him, and Yuffie from the rest of the Heartless and Nobodies. Nice job, you guys, Axel said as he stepped out from behind the building that had initially started the battle from. It better have been a nice job, Yuffie panted as Riku sprayed both of their accumulated wounds with potions. Well, let's see here, Axel said as the flames momentarily separated from the hordes crackled. You two held off the Heartless from reaching anyone else for 15 minutes. They have just circled around you two and became a mass enveloping the town. We've lost at least 30 to the Heartless. At least 10 are actually straight dead. And Kosix hasn't even bothered to attack you yet. She just went right by you guys and hit Titus, the Blitz team, and our Block 4 class. Riku and Yuffie gasped at this horrendous news. She Has she hit our VIPs yet? Riku asked. Axel shook his head. Not yet, he said glumly. She killed John and Brittany, and then she used her powers to make 3 of the rest writhe in agony for 10 minutes as Heartless swept by them, stealing hearts from Fred, George, and 2 others on the team. Right now she's having fun destroying the town with a few behemoths and on her guard of invisibles and berserkers. Yuffie leaked out a tear. But wait, she explained. I thought Riku and I took out the behemoths. How many did you destroy? Axel asked. Well, Riku answered, 2, but we've only seen 2. Axel shook his head sadly. There are 16 in total. Got it memorized? This news left the teens standing in a state of shock. Riku looked out towards the town. He suddenly became aware of the sounds of screams, explosions, fires, and alarms. Parts of the city were burning, and explosions kept peppering the place even as far out as the small island. He could barely see Kosek standing atop the shoulder of one of the behemoths that was breaking the city, her blue hair waving in the wind as she laughed, a strange sound coming from her lips like she was forcing herself to laugh while causing the explosions and many of the screams. She lifted her arms, and suddenly the mountain upon the small island exploded, sending shockwaves through the province. The buildings they were standing on next to suddenly cracked, and the 3 of them threw themselves out of the way just in time to avoid being flattened. How? Yuffie splurted, tears choking her words. How did she get so many Heartless? They gather Heartless from every living creature, Riku growled as he helped her up, and multiply. If she was breeding them outside the towns, she had plenty of bugs to donate hearts to the cause. Come on, Axel roared as he leapt to his feet. We need to get to the Meister's office pronto. We're the only hope for them now. On that note, the 3 of them sprinted through the wreckage, stopping now and then to gather any of their surviving warriors to follow them, in eliminating Heartless that ran rampant through the broken streets. They ran up to a teen carrying a crystal blue sword and had a disheartened following behind them, one of them wielding a blitzball. Titus! Riku yelled as he recognized the teen. Titus turned around at Riku's voice, and his face filled with hope. Riku! He breathed. And Miss Yuffie! We thought you 2 were dead. It's going to take more than Heartless and nobody to stop us, Titus, Yuffie said. Come with us, she ordered. We're heading for the Meister's office. It's imperative we stop Kosek. What, you mean the bitch who killed John and Brittany and caused us to lose half the team to the Heartless? Walker roared. Let's make her a goner. Aye, his party agreed, and the whole group was running flat out towards where the office stood. Thankfully, they arrived before Kosek, who was still just drawing for sport, and set up a perimeter with her 12 troops around the office to hopefully hold out against the attack. Riku turned as he heard the door open and contorted his face into one of disbelief as he saw Seymour, Janet, and Anne striding out. Get back inside, he ordered sternly. It isn't safe for you out here. Riku, Anne said slowly as her gaze dropped. We just saw one of those things' feet crush your house. Your parents were still inside. Riku felt his heart stopped as he just stood stunned, staring at the 3 parents of his best friends. He could feel Yuffie's hand on his shoulder, but he didn't hear her condolences. How? He choked out. How do you know? Janet lifted her bowed head to reveal shining tears. We were talking on the phone with them, she said shakily, when all of a sudden we heard a crashing noise and the sound of the phone. She became too emotional to continue, and she made a motion instead with her finger across her neck. So Riku suddenly felt wetness across his cheeks and placed a hand to his aqua eyes to find that he was crying. He didn't care anymore, and he let the tears fall as he wept freely. Oh, how emotional! Riku whipped around, wiping the tears from his eyes, to see a blue-haired woman wearing a black coat with silver chains hanging from it, standing in front of them. Kosek! He spat. Everyone who hadn't seen her suddenly ran forward and surrounded her, poised to strike. Kosek laughed at their feeble attempt to appear imposing to her. Why can't I think I've had a better reception? She said sarcastically. Good thing I've brought people with me. She snapped her fingers, and 8 invisibles appeared around her, holding their long blue swords in front of them. The teachers and teenage warriors began to back away in concern, but Riku, Yuffie, and Axel held their ground. Fight, Kosek proposed, and all of you, except you three, she pointed out the three warriors of light, will die. Orders, you know. Surrender, and unfortunately, only most of your lives will be spared. She then looked emotionlessly at Seymour, Janet, and Anne. Orders, you know. What are you going to do? Seymour asked, trying his best to sound courageous. Cossacks laughed quietly at him. It's something you don't need to be concerned much about, she said as her invisible guard slowly advanced. I'm just going to kill you. Now, would you like slow, painful death, or the quick and easy kind? Your soul will dwell with Grenth either way. You won't lay a finger on them, Riku threatened menacingly, branding the way to the dawn in front of him. Cossack sighed and shook her head. Well, she said to herself, I tried. Riku raised his eyebrow inquiringly at Cossack, something about the way she said that wondering. She then slowly raised her arms and pointed at Riku and Yuffie, who were guarding Seymour, Janet, and Anne. Mind Crush! Riku howled in agony as he fell to the ground, way to the dawn vanishing, and Yuffie falling beside him. It was worse than the worst migraine he'd ever had, like 100 times worse. It was all he could do to register that the three he was supposed to be protecting and the girl he liked were all cowering on the ground with him. Suddenly, things began to flash through his mind. They didn't cause any physical pain, but they hurt worse. He saw the crushed and mangled bodies of his parents, Sora and Kairi, lying blood-stained grass, dismembered, and Yuffie so hacked up he could barely tell it was Yuffie, the only clues being the red headband and blood-stained flower pattern on the lower half of a black shirt. He tried to forcibly remind himself not to imagine that it wasn't real. He forcibly opened his eyes, looking up at the Thought Crusher in pain and anger. Cossacks gleaming her silver axe with a red haft and golden pommel. From the tip of the haft, but a spike protruded near to the blade. Cossacks kept her smirk as she forcibly grabbed Michael and lifted him to his feet, her fearful face greeting her. Do you fear death? She asked him. Michael nodded fiercely, and staring into her unblinking eyes, he found no mercy in them. Take comfort in where you're going. It's better than losing your heart. She sliced off his right arm with her axe, forcing him to lose his sword in the process, his shriek of pain echoing grimly through Riku's mind. Son of a bitch! He yelled in agony and shock. She just cut off my arm! Next is your head! Cossacks growled as she slashed her axe at his neck. Michael snapped his head back, and the axe was only able to slit his throat, but death still came to the boy. Holy shit! A random boy who had been walking by with his two friends yelled in a highly muffled voice. Cossacks turned on him and threw her axe with a roar. The axe embedded in his skull, and the kid fell down dead. Oh my god! One of them yelled. She killed Kenny! You bastard! The other one insulted. Cossack stiffened as she retrieved her axe. Shut up, she said as she slew the two of them. She then turned around and strode past the writhing figures of Yuffie and Axel and their band to stop in front of the Keyblade heroes' parents. Riku's eyes followed her as he forced one of his knees up so he crouched with one foot flat against the ground. And now you must be killed, Cossack said, directing her voice at the three parents. She moved in front of Anne first and stopped for a moment to taunt her. Mother of Sora, she began, you have a stout heart, much like your son. She plunged the spike of her axe deep into Anne's right side, and Anne let out a blood-curdling scream. Cossacks removed her axe and stuck the spike into Anne's body, this time right into her heart. But he has a princess to protect him, she continued, wrenching her tip back out. Anne jerked spastically for another second before she sighed out her last breath. Cossacks turned and stood before Janet's weeping and cringing figure. Foster mother of Kairi, she began before swinging her axe blade and cutting into Janet's back and heart. Just die quickly. Cossacks left Janet and turned to Seymour. Foster father of Kairi, she said, preparing to swing her blade to decapitate him. No! Riku yelled in horror as he threw his keyblade at Cossacks. Cossacks turned and the blade passed her by, clattering on the blood-stained cobblestones. Seymour flipped onto his back and began to scuttle away, making a bid for freedom. Cossacks heard his movements, though, and turned back, her face yellow curled into a snarl as she ran Seymour through with the spike. He looked up at her in shock before collapsing on the ground, gasping for breath. Kosix turned and looked at Riku, Axel, and Yuffie. "Nice job defending them," she said sarcastically before opening a portal and withdrawing. Once inside the portal, she let it close behind her. Confident that none of them could see or hear her, Kosix let her axe go and bent down, looking at her blood-stained hands in pain. "It should not have been this way," she started out, sickened. "My heart isn't worth this much pain." Riku and the others barely noticed that all the heartless and nobodies began to fade away. All Riku could tell was that his head no longer hurt, and with that in mind, ran forward to Seymour's side. He looked like a fish out of water, opening and closing his mouth in a vain attempt for air, and the wound Kosix had given him went deep into his gut. Riku, he breathed out, looking at the silvered-haired teenager with his last moments of life. "Yes, what is it?" Riku choked out, tears streaming from his aqua eyes. Seymour began crying tears of sympathy for him. "Tell them to look after each other," Seymour said with his last breath. "They're all they have now, until Kairi." Seymour began to make a death rattle, and he knew his time was nigh. "Tell Kairi I love her." Seymour's head slumped back, and Riku wept and retched as howling sounds of mourning and grief rose into the night. They were beaten. They had lost. Sora and Kairi were going to kill them. That was Chapter 14, Maleficent's Revenge. And I would like to thank my good friend StarRider88 for voicing Nixion, and I hope he will be able to voice Nixion in the future. And if you would also like to voice a character, then find me on Twitter at Anneguykurosaki1 or find me on Skype at Anneguykurosaki1. May the grace of the Valor protect you.